where I got the most experience is being a manager. Being a manager in higher education. You would have the same experience. You say to someone, go and do something. It's like, okay. You say to someone else, go do it like that. It's done different. Same tasks, same interventions. Já vamos. São mais baixinhos. Obrigado. Vamos dar então por isso. Distinguished colleagues, esteemed students, and participants, it is a great pleasure and an honor that I welcome you all to the International Conference on Developmental and Life Course Criminology here in Lisbon at ISPA. This conference reflects the growing recognition of developmental and life course criminology as central to the future of crime prevention policies. Over the years, our field has increasingly focused on understanding the sequences and transitions individuals experience throughout their lives, deepening our insights into the factors that contribute to criminal behavior and, more importantly, how we can intervene more effectively. At the core of today's discussions is the belief that prevention must be strategic, evidence-based, and grounded in comprehensive understanding of human development. The knowledge we share here will enhance our understanding and contribute to more tailored and effective crime prevention measures across the lifespan. We are fortunate to have here with us some of the world leading scholars, including Professor Frederick Luza, Professor Derek Joliffe, Professor MANUEL EISNER, Professor LIDÓN VILLANUEVA, among many others who have greatly shaped the trajectory of our discipline. This conference also marks the culmination of the Shame Prevent project, a research initiative funded by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology, which has brought together experts and institutions from different countries to investigate the complex chain of events leading to the development and persistence of antisocial behavior. The findings we'll explore and discuss today represent an important step forward in our mission to prevent crime by addressing its roots in early development. This event also highlights our commitment to give back to the community has supported us throughout its journey, offering free registration and bringing together some of the world top experts is our way of reciprocating the support we have received. I'm also proud to share that this conference filled all in-person seats within just 4 days, with participants joining us online from more than 10 countries across the globe. Your enthusiasm and support underscore the importance and relevance of the topics we are addressing today. Finally, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the marketing team at ISPA, to the organizing committee, and the volunteers who selflessly offered their time and energy to help make this event a reality. Their altruism and dedication are a testament to the spirit of collaboration that drives our shared efforts. Due to a health condition, Professor David Farrington unfortunately is unable to be present with us today. However, I'd like to take a moment to express my deep gratitude to him as the co-principal investigator of the Shame Prevent and the director of the Cambridge Study in Clinical Development. His work has been crucial in enabling us to conduct this innovative research. But it goes far beyond that. Over the past decade, Professor David Farrington has not only been a vital collaborator in much of my research, but he has also served as an extraordinary role model in my both professional and personal life. His guidance and support has been invaluable, and I am truly honored to have him as part of my journey. I would also like to extend my gratitude to the William James Center for Research and to ISPA Instituto Universitário, represented here today by Professor MANUEL, Vice Head of ISPA and Director of the School of Psychology.
developmental psychology, and it is a great honor to have her with us today. Thank you all for being here. Hope this conference inspired you and foster meaningful exchange to advance our shared goals. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight with you. And the name of ISPA, the name of the School of Psychology, the name of the Center of Research Center, I would like to thank you all to be present here, and I'm sure that you're going to enjoy the entire day and learn a lot with all the interesting and important conference that you're going to have the possibility to listen to. Today we are here to discuss kind of things. And I'm not sure if all of you understand the importance of the project that he did, the results that he showed, but also the work that we have now, of course, with Andrea and John here on site to tell. But we now have a master's degree in forensic psychology that has been important, very master's program in our school. And it's important not only because there's a lot of people that want to work for so this line of work, but it's important because it combines both the things that I and it's very research and applied. It's we have talked a little bit about the subject, the importance of getting this place, the importance of knowing the process, the importance of knowing what we're talking about, this one, these values. And I think the group that you kind of expressed today is based on this, to me personally, very important. You should know the process, and you need to be we have to do acts of development psychology. Some of you know, but again, my heart is on federalism and astrology, and so I'm always going to be there. But I know and I understand the importance of also understanding one of the non-normative aspects of it. I think this conference and the research that is today combines this very, very important aspects. Know, describe, understand the process, and then research. And I think that's what we're going to listen to. So it's a big pleasure to be here thank you very much for all the work that you've done. And I hope that it's just the beginning of a very long career, and in my own work. I would like to thank all of you for hearing our colleagues from all over the world and that are here today to share their knowledge. To listen to me, so thank you very much, and again for this interesting process. Thank you.
Vamos para a parte interessante que eu ouvi. Um pouquinho, né? Não, faz. There's no microphone there, so I'll just say here, no worries. Okay, can we begin? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this session, and where we will explore how various risk factors can influence the development of criminal behavior over time. Today, we are privileged to hear from two distinguished scholars who will provide you and us, all of us, with valuable insights into the development pathways leading to criminal behavior. Our first speaker is Professor Manuel EISNER, the Wolfson Professor of Criminology and Director of the Institute of Criminology at the University of Cambridge. With a background in history and sociology, Professor EISNER has been a pivotal figure at the Institute of Criminology since 2000. His research focuses on the role of violence and its control in the evolution of human societies and individual development over the lifespan. Notably, he has conducted extensive studies on the history of homicide since the Middle Ages, examining how violence is influenced by power structures and state control. Additionally, he is a principal investigator in the Zurich project on social development from childhood to adulthood, a comprehensive 20-year longitudinal study tracking individuals from ages 7 to 26. Today, Professor EISNER will delve into the complex thoughts and fantasies related to violence that individuals may experience from adolescence through early adulthood, offering a profound exploration of the cognitive aspects of violent behavior. Thank you, Professor EISNER. You can start your presentation.
Hello. Welcome and thanks a lot for inviting me to give this talk today about violent fantasies. This is a topic that I got interested in a few years ago when I was thinking about all the research that has been done on moral beliefs about violence and attitudes towards violence. And I was thinking, well, when I think about violence among adolescents, one of the things is that there is this element of just having fantasies of violence that are hard to control. It's not yet about making a moral judgment about whether they're right or wrong. They just happen to people that they think about violence. And so I thought it's important and interesting to try to understand when and where this happens and how frequent, how widespread violent fantasies are. So you'll see a slide in a second. So this is equivalent to the question, how many of you have ever thought about killing somebody? And if you thought about killing somebody, why have you not done it? So this is the kind of questions that are at the background of my thoughts. Just to make things easier, I will start with the conclusion so you know what I'm going to talk about, and then you can kind of like conceptualize the remaining elaborations. So this is a summary in 6 points. I define violent ideations as thoughts, daydreams, or fantasies of inflicting harm on another individual, and they're widespread in late adolescence, in mid to late adolescence, especially among men. Violent ideations, violent fantasies are an interesting combination of both trait-like characteristics and something that responds to situations. They can be triggered by experiences of victimization and social rejection and exclusion. They're predicted developmentally by indicators of childhood trained aggressiveness, but that's not the only thing. They are also predicted by low impulse control, high media consumption, low teacher balance, and low parental involvement during childhood. So this is about predicting violent ideations 10 years later, and what kind of characteristics predict when you have a high propensity to have violent fantasies. They can be intrusive, and have significant impact on your mental health. Again, you notice that you can't really control whether they happen, or instead when you control whether they happen is limited. But if they do happen repeatedly and severely, they can have a negative impact on your mental well-being, and they increase the risk of future violent behavior. And finally, I want to make the case that there can be a locus of meaningful prevention and intervention activities as part of wider cognitive behavioral interventions and efforts to address anger, trauma, and conflict management. So that's basically the main question. Now I was planning to do a little survey asking you this question. Have you ever thought about killing someone who insulted, humiliated, or threatened you or something else to you? I've asked this question before. I know it's always a little bit difficult because people start looking around and checking whether others are saying anything or not. And of course, in this audience, which is predominantly female, there is probably just gender issue. But I'm still curious. Who would say that they ever had this kind of fantasies ever in their life? This is the usual thing that happens. So one hand goes up, and then you have this epidemic of other hands going up. I haven't counted how many hands have gone up, but it just shows that it's not a minority. It's probably in this classroom because you're nice people. It's not a minority. It's not generally just a very few people. Here is a reassuring thing. If those of you who have said, "Well, I've had these kind of practices," you're not alone. There is a number of studies that have looked at this. These are just two studies. These were, of course, much more serious studies where you have anonymity and you give a questionnaire. And so basically the result is about 81%, 70% of males and about 60% of females report at least one homicidal ideation ever in their life. And when you look at the Arizona study, I will come back to this, male fantasies are longer and more detailed. But there is a general topic here that when you ask people about the kind of what are the fantasies about? They're about personal threats, they're about public humiliation, they're about threats against the third person, and that's quite consistent between these two cultures. I actually think there is a more general pattern behind it. So, having noted that violent fantasies are widespread, the interesting question arises: well, is it normal to fantasize about violence? And so I went in before and got some conversations. And here are just two quotes. There was one woman who said, "Yeah, it's normal. The other day at school, some dickhead shoved me to the side and said, 'Pick a side, lady.' So I daydreamed about pushing it down the stairs. It's normal." And there was another person who says, I'm permanently jealous and insecure person. I also do not have enough wits to counter when someone makes a joke at my expense. I'm too weak to reply when someone speaks rudely to me. So I keep on fantasizing about killing those people. So this just gives you an idea of what is going on. But of course, if we say, well, these two voices are saying it's normal, there is, of course, also this phenomenon. This is about Elliot Rodger, the hero of the incel movement, who was obsessively fantasizing about killing, raping women. And if you look at the literature of mass killers, juvenile mass killers, you will repeatedly see this long history of obsessive, compulsive fantasies around the topic of violence. So maybe it's a question of dosage, how much fantasies people have, whether it's normal or not. So this leads me to the questions that I want to look at today. How widespread are these thoughts of killing, attacking, humiliating others? What causes these episodes of violent thoughts? Are they associated with violent behavior? And then should they be targeted as part of intervention and prevention strategy? I will do this by showing you some results from the Zurich study on social development from childhood to early adulthood. It's a study that I started with the kind help of people like Friedrich Lösel, who was involved in this study and helped set up this study from the very beginning. It's a longitudinal study of about 1,500 young people. This slide just shows you the data collection waves. And you see here, by the way, that we have really made an effort to have very close repeated measures so we can track change over time in quite a lot of detail. We have a good retention rate. We still have over 70% of the initial target group in the sample. The time intervals have become a little bit longer. And this is not the end. We just learned 2 weeks ago that we got the funding for another 4 years, so we continue until age 28. And we're now in the process of recruiting the children of the study participants. So we're going into generation 3 of this longitudinal study. As part of this study, we implemented a violent ideation scale. We developed this instrument ourselves. It includes 12 questions, which I will show in a second. They include thoughts of different types and levels of violence. This scale was administered to participants at ages 17, 20, and 24. We had a reduced version. We only had one question at age 15, which was when we started with asking the question, have you ever thought about killing somebody? I will show you the results. The instrument was initially developed in German, but it's now also been validated in English, Spanish, and I only learned last week that there is an Arabic translation now of this instrument, which is quite interesting. It has excellent psychometric properties. One of the things that we did learn is the fantasies of sexual violence, which we included in the instrument. They are a different dimension. So at the level of the fantasies, physical violence fantasies and sexual violence fantasies are two different things. I would mostly, actually almost exclusively, talk about the main violent fantasy scale. And it would be a different separate talk to talk about sexual violence. What do I mean by violent ideations? I mean thoughts, daydreams, fantasies of inflicting harm on another individual. They can vary a lot in terms of intensity and elaboration. They can be elaborate, detailed, nuanced stories about what you would like to do, but they can also be just fleeting thoughts. Maybe some of you have been standing, which is interesting psychological phenomenon. Maybe some of you have been standing in the underground and had this fleeting thought of pushing somebody down rails, which is something that happens to many, many people. And it just seems to happen cognitively as a strange, often the feeling is embarrassment. Why has this happened to me? But it's a quite widespread thought that occurs to people. So this is how we did this. People sometimes think about things that they would never actually do. How is this for you? Please indicate below how often you thought about those things in the last month. Be intentionally asked about in the last month. So before any ever in your life, I think some of you remember what kind of fantasies you had even 6 months ago or a year ago. And we thought this is very unreliable. And so we thought just focusing on the last month is probably going to give us more specific and more interesting information about thinking patterns. And we've asked them about thoughts about killing someone I know, humiliating someone I despise, eating someone's pulp because they made me really angry. And then I also show you one of the sexual violence items, stripping someone naked against their will. And so they responded from never, rarely, sometimes often, to very often over the last 30 days. It's important here to bear in mind that when I talk about violent ideations, I theoretically conceptualize them as part of the wider world of aggressive conditions. But it's important to bear in mind that the fantasies are only one part of this universe. So moral visualizations of violence, the kind of things that Albert Bandura has been talking about, emotions that are linked to aggressive behavior like anger, hate, or revenge, or also kind of like rational estimates of cost benefits of perpetrating violent act. They all belong to this universe, but violent scripted ideations, the kind of things that Bushman and Anderson have been talking about, they are at the core of my talk today. I want to start with just showing you 5 facts about violent ideations, and then I will explore some more common questions about causal mechanisms of developmental association. How prevalent are violent ideations now relating to the last month? We can see here that 74% of males told us that last month, at age 17, they were thinking at least once about some kind of violence. And that's much bigger, much higher than for females. When we just look at this, thinking about killing somebody, 24% of males and 7% of females reported at least one murderous fantasy. I tried to calculate how long it would take these young people to kill the entire population of Switzerland. And it only takes them about 4 months if they acted on their violent fantasies. So this is one of the interesting things that comes out of this research, that there is this overproduction in adolescent minds of committing really serious acts of violence. And many of them, of course, never do this. And this is interesting. Why should the brain produce all these fantasies? And for a minority, 8% of males and 2% of females, they have violent ideations very frequently in the last month. And if you think about very frequently over a period of a month, that probably means daily or maybe even several times a day. So that's the minority where it becomes intrusive and obsessive. But as I said, it's the minority. The second fact that I want to highlight here is the trend of violent ideations over age. And one of the things that you can see here is that for both males and females, you have a peak around ages 15, 17, and then it declines very steeply and very much parallel for both males and females. Just one note on the reasons behind this decline. I think this decline is partly related to just brain maturation processes, including better impulse control and better ability of thoughtfulness, but it's also linked to a reduction in the risk of victimization. So the kind of dynamics, situational dynamics that lead to violent ideation are probably declining as young people become older. Fact 3, differences in experiences in violent ideations are relatively stable over time. So this is about the topic of violent ideations as a trait-like characteristic. So these coefficients up here, the blue ones and the red ones, they are stability coefficients. So they measure how stable is the likelihood that you experience violent ideations again at age 20 and age 24 if you have experienced violent ideation at a previous age. These stability coefficients are quite high. They're almost as high as the stability estimates for actual violent behavior. So what this shows you is that between individuals, there is quite a strong kind of stability propensity trait, you call it whatever you like, but something that makes you more likely to experience these kind of ideations. But while it's going down overall, the relatively rank order remains similar over time. Violent ideations are linked to violent behavior. So some people I talked to before I showed the results think, well, having some violent fantasies is actually good for you because it allows you to fantasize and it allows you kind of like, this is kind of like a catharsis hypothesis. It makes sure that you don't actually act out on it. This slide here shows that violent ideations are strongly positively associated with the likelihood of reactive aggression, proactive aggression, physical aggression, bullying perpetration, and criminal assault and robbery. And that association holds at ages 17, 20, and 24. I just wanted to highlight one finding here that violent ideations is most strongly associated with reactive aggression. So responding violently if you have been provoked. And I think that's not a coincidence. So it's kind of like the reactiveness to a sense of having been provoked that is most strongly associated with thinking about violence. Thoughts about violence are also linked to a number of indicators of poor mental well-being. I don't know whether any of you have been trying to do more systematic work on, for instance, school shooters or other young people who commit very serious violent crimes. This is a normative sample, so this is not a high-risk sample, but when you look at this, they're more likely to have psychotic symptoms, so like feeling persecuted, feeling under the control of others. They're more likely to be stressed, not being able to control things, can't overcome difficulties, more likely to feel excluded, worthless, no chance in society, more likely to be angry, and more likely to experience internalizing symptoms such as hating themselves, feeling alone, or being different. So I find this quite interesting in the sense that they're not just associated with one symptom of poor mental well-being, they're associated with quite a wide range of different manifestations of poor mental health. So these are 5 facts that I think are just important to bear in mind when we try to understand what is happening with violent ideations. And so I want to briefly talk about some ideas about causes of violent ideations. And I think, like many others, that when we try to answer these kind of developmental questions, we distinguish, make a first general distinction between short-term dynamics and long-term dynamics. So most human mechanisms have a short-term component in that they respond to something, they try to solve a problem in our brains that deals with the situation, but they also vary between individuals. And so we need to distinguish between situational explanations and explanations of underlying propensity. So I'll start just briefly with situational dynamics. And I won't talk about everything, but one of the things that I'm very interested in, also as a historian, by the way, in connection with, for instance, blood feud and revenge mechanisms historically, I'm interested in this question of whether experiences of victimization, revenge, peer rejection, humiliation, trigger violent thoughts. And so one of the things that we did in a paper that we published in 2021 was to test this empirically by looking at the relationship between having experienced victimization, that's on the horizontal axis, and the likelihood that you think about violent acts. And this is a relatively strong design because we have this longitudinal data, so we can control for everything that has happened before in their lives. So we think this is almost kind of like a propensity score approach. So we really try to measure, is the event of victimization associated with an increase in comparison to the previous way in the likelihood. How the risks are associated with later violent ideation. I'm just summarizing this visually here. There are 2 major dynamics going on in our data. One is that violent ideations are part of aggressive propensity, if you will. Young people who were assessed by their teachers as being high on aggression, young people who already reported at age 11 about for exploring visualization of violence and having violent beliefs, they're more likely to have violent ideations 10 years later. But there are a number of other unique risk factors, so controlling for the violent propensity. Indicators, all kind of like indicators of poor social bonds. You can see this here, low prosociality, poor teacher relationship, low parental involvement, all indicative of something going wrong in the social interaction with others. They're all indicative, predictive of poor violent ideation. And then there is also this indicator of high media consumption. Violent ideations are also prospectively associated with poor violent behavior. So when we look at violent ideations at age 17, we can see that at age 20, those who fantasize a lot about violence are more likely to carry a knife, a weapon. So meaning that, almost around, many of them are about being threatened by somebody, and I respond violently against that threat. So the natural thing to do is to get weapons to defend yourself against possible future threat. They're more likely to commit criminal assault, males. They're more likely to commit bullying and aggression, more likely to commit intimate partner violence, and they're more likely to have violent radical beliefs. So overall, violent fantasies are actually prospectively associated with a range of violent behaviors later in life. Oh, this is a repetition of advanced work. I want to spend the last few minutes on the question of what do these findings mean for intervention and prevention strategies. The first entry point that I can think of is, so thinking practically about where would be the entry points to work with violent ideation. And the first one is victim response and support. So people who come into contact with some kind of system, whether it's in school protection, so you're a school psychologist, whether it's in other intervention context, consulting, counseling, and so on, pay attention to violent fantasies about anger, retaliation, purification, and both self and other-directed fantasies, because they're indicative of potential wider problems. And so there is a number of possible intervention strategies. Trauma-focused behavioral therapy is one approach. I really would have a lot more about this. Or restorative justice intervention, so kind of like intervention that try to reduce the antagonism between and the hatred, negative feelings between the perpetrator and the victim, and therefore bring down violent ideations. Violent ideations can and should be part of violent offender interventions. So violent ideations may hinder desistance processes. We saw that resistance is the pattern, the general pattern, but if violent ideations persist for a long period of time, they can hinder resistance. Again, cognitive behavioral interventions for the perpetrator, anger management interventions, social and emotional learning, and moral education programs, maybe kind of programs that target violent practices as part of a kind of like more broader cognitive intervention strategy. Mental health support. So these intrusive violent thoughts may be part of a wider syndrome of poor mental health. And sometimes maybe the interventions are not necessarily targeting the violent fantasies, but they may be actually having an effect on the violent fantasies by targeting either the depressive symptoms or the psychotic symptoms or the anger, the social exclusion experiences that young people have. And finally, in terms of, that's the second last slide, in terms of lifestyle, parenting, and school, controlling problematic media consumption can help to disrupt the formation of self-reinforcing violent ideations. So I think the media consumption to a large extent is kind of like self-selection into consuming the kind of media that confirm, reaffirm the already existing beliefs, but they do end up producing these circles where these ideations are being reinforced and strengthened. So controlling problematic media consumption is important. And finally, at the school level or at the context level, addressing behaviors that trigger sentiments of exclusion, that trigger sentiments of being treated in a negative way, are a key element of also being helpful to promote the reduction of triggers of violent ideation. So this is the summary again. I'm not going to read it out again because I already showed it to you at the beginning. I hope I've covered all the points that I outlined, and thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Eisner, for this compelling dive into the psychology of violent ideation through lifespan. And our next speaker is Professor LIDÓN Villanueva, a full professor in developmental psychology at Universitat in Castellón, Spain. She holds degrees in teaching, training, and psychology, and a postgraduate course in forensic psychology. Professor Villanueva has been recognized for her research excellence by the Spanish Ministry of Science and Education, having been awarded 4 6-year research periods. Her accolades include the Extraordinary Award of PhD in 2000 from Università JOM, first, I would say. The Professionalism and Commitment Award in 2015 by Fundación Diagrama, and the Quality of Justice Award in 2018 in the Most Effective Justice category, granted by the General Council of the Judiciary in Madrid. Her research primarily focused on socially emotional development in children and adolescents, with particular attention to forensic psychology implications. She has investigated the influence of emotions on peer relationships and well-being, as well as youth offending and recidivism. Professor Villanueva has undertaken research stays at various national and international universities. She has served as academic secretary and head of the Developmental Psychology Department at Università JOM first, you say that? First, from 2006 to 2017, and currently teaches in the degrees of psychology, criminology, teacher training, and various master programs. Today, she will discuss how the Risk-Need-Responsivity Model can be applied to better understand and address the needs of juvenile courts, providing critical insights into effective interventions for juvenile offenders. Professor Villanueva, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, first I would like to express my gratitude to Fantasies. It's a pleasure to come back here from time to time for holding this conference. Of course, the organizing committee, and especially to Professor Miguel Pereira, who is the main organizing, for giving us the opportunity to meet and serve here for being such a good coordinator, researcher, and friend. So here, I would like to present you a part of our research that we are a bit proud of because it's grounded on practical demands. So professional demands from real life. So here we have the Juvenile Court. We have an enduring collaboration with this service, with the technical team of the Juvenile Court for many, many years, because we serve internships, psychology internships. From the very beginning, we began to do research with them. So I would like to show you how we try to address all the practical demands that they share, the technical team share with us. So first of all, I'd like to present you the model which all the research is based on. It's the Risk-Need-Responsivity Model, which is one of the most prominent approaches to offender assessment and intervention. His main goal is to generate effective interventions and to reduce recidivity. So it has three principles here. You can see that, for example, the risk principle says that effective intervention should use reliable and validated risk assessment, as the one we are going to see afterwards. And second part, once you have this risk assessment of the minor, the youth offender, treatment services have to match with risk. So we have to target the higher risk young youth, because sometimes for low risk minors, it's better not to intervene at all. So because some studies show that low risk offenders, youth offenders, has a normal recidivism rate of 15. But if we have the same low risk minors with intensive treatment, not minimal, intensive one, so we double the recidivism rate. So we have to keep this in mind because it's important. And then the need principle says that we have to target the 7 dynamic factors, that is the factors that are susceptible to interventions, to be changed by intervention. For example, substance abuse, family interventions, the one that my colleague already told about, for example, peer victimization. Also, these are the criminogenic bits that lead to, that have shown to be linked to reduces in resilience. Finally, the responsivity principle says that we have to match treatment style to offenders' learning style. For example, this would be providing individual counseling to a shy offender, for example. We are going to focus on the first two principles, the risk-need principles, because it's the competencies that the Juvenile Court has in Spain, because they can act in the pre-trial phase and in the trial phase, but not in the intervention or enactment phase. Right? So more context, here in Spain, we have the technical team of the Juvenile Court has to interview and to write a report about every single minor from 14 to 18 years old, which is the age period of criminal responsibility in Spain, about their criminogenic needs, so social, family, and so on. What for? So to recommend an educational measure to the judge. So here you can have some examples. I'm sure you also have these educational measures here. So they have to match this risk assessment with the treatment assignment, right? As you can see here, they are an interdisciplinary team, psychologists, community workers. So they need a common criteria to share to obtain this risk level and then to propose an educational measure. So what we did here, we proposed them to pass from professional judgment, that was the one that they were using. So you can think of a semi-structured interview, just previous experiences with minors, that's it. We proposed them to pass from there to dynamic risk scales, to the use of these risk scales. That not only included static risk factors, for example, prior offenses, but also dynamic, the ones that we can change, right? So specifically, we propose them to use the YLS CMI inventory, which is one of the most well-known and validated all over the world, because it's a good predictor of general resilience. We can have other tools, as you can see here, the SABRI, which is quite used in Barcelona, in the Netherlands, but this is only for specifically for violent resilience. So we proposed them to use this scale, and they accepted. Hopefully they accepted. We initiated the training of the whole team in this tool. This tool has 42 items that are grouped in 8 subdomains that are the criminogenic needs. So we are following the needs principle. These 8 risk factors have shown to be linked to reduces reductions in recidivism. And then you can see these 4. These are called the central 8. We have these 4 colored in red, which are the most discriminative ones related to resilience, right? So we have only one static risk factors, prior and current offenses, and we also have these other, all the rest are dynamic. So the technical team get used to using this tool and to obtain a low risk, level of risk for each minor. So filling in the tool with all the multiple sources they have of interest, the school, child protection services, their own interview. So for each child, we have this level from low to very high. And during the 2 first years of using it, they ask us, are we doing well with inventory? So this is the first demand. Are we doing well? Can you check if we are doing well? So we thought about this study, predictive validity of the inventory in Spanish youth offenders. And this is the main strength of this study because it's a very different cultural background from the one that the inventory was originally developed in Canada. So what we found after in this study was that they were doing very well. So the inventory showed a rock hard value of 0.83, and as you can see in the graphic, it predicted recidivism in the follow-up of 2 years in the follow-up of 2 years. So we collected all the recidivism the minors were committing during these 2 years, and we related it to the risk of level and it matched, right? So we have these good results with the inventory, so they were encouraged to go on with it. And we also found that the most predictive subdomains in the Spanish context were education, leisure, and personality. Only one of the big four. Remember the ones in red? So only one, personality. The rest, educational, leisure, and this is a constant in our studies on other sides. What they did afterwards, they explained us. We did discuss this risk principle. So once we have this assessment, how can we match the level of risk with the supervision level? So here you have the higher the risk, the higher the supervision level. So if you have some educational measures from the lowest level of supervision or freedom restriction to the highest one, which is flow center. So they thought that a good match was this one. If you have a low level of risk, you can get not an educational message, but just close the file. Nothing happened here. Everything is over. So this is a kind of risk principle of don't intervene at all with low risk youth offenders, right? If you are very suggestive minor, is your first time there, the juvenile court, you can have the reprimand from the judge. So you see that it's a kind of responsivity principle, so tailoring the intervention to the specific characteristics of the minor. But if you go for a high or very high level, you are probably assigned probation or confinement. I have to say that in this, some cases challenge the risk principle, because if you think about, I don't know if it's a problem here, but unaccompanied foreign minors from the north of Africa coming to Spain. So we have a lot of these minors that have low or moderate risk, but they are assigned confinement. Not much. Why? Because they don't have the family support, the social support, they don't even have the house to stay. So some cases are complicated. Next demand. Please, do you have any disorder? Because this is a 42 tool, it's quite lengthy. And sometimes we have these arrested minors during the week or the weekend. So we have to recommend these urgent measures. We have to adopt precautionary measures, temporal measures, until a more extended assessment is done. So we thought it was a good idea to look for a screening strategy that help the technical team to find a screening strategy for these urgent cases. So we made the study in Spain first with Professor Miguel, and here you have the results in Spain. You obtain a 7-item combination, a particular combination of 7 items that reduce more than 80% of the inventory and increase predictive validity. So you can see here that the shorter version is even better than the long one, the total one, right? And well, the same happened more or less in Canada. We contacted people, researchers in Canada that also use the same inventory, more or less the same. And also in Portugal, you see here very similar values. And the most important thing is that it worked very well with females and males, which is one of the most critical points of the inventory, that it has got a very good predictive validity for women sometimes. So for gender and for ethnic minorities, it worked pretty well. So, well, we told the juvenile court, of course, that it sometimes is you have to be cautious to take custody decisions only with the short version, because especially in quite severe cases, right? But they began to use it at the weekends, so that's nice. And what is the last demand so far from the juvenile court? They were worried after a while. Are we doing well with ethnic minorities in Spain? Because they have an overrepresentation of Arabs origin, Arab youth in Spain and in the juvenile court, and also for Roma children. So they were a bit worried about if the questionnaire was, or the inventory was kind of discriminating them in any way, because was a very complete different cultural background, Canada. So we decided to carry out this study with ethnic minorities. So we have a group of Roma youth offenders, a group of Arab offenders, and a non-ethnic group. So here you see, if we put together the risk of level and the recidivism that they really committed in prospective study design, you can see here what is the Roma group obtained a higher rate of false positive cases. That is, they were considered more recidivism than they really were, right? So this is a misclassification error. What about the Arab group? So here we have that in comparison to the rest of the groups, they have a kind of positive bias. They were considered less recidivist, like less risk level than they really were in the 1 year follow-up, I think was in this case. So this was interesting to keep in mind. And we also carried out other analysis with them, these groups, and we saw that always, although I have to say that the inventory worked pretty well in all the ethnic minorities, I have to say that if you see the Roma group always obtain slightly differences, smaller, lower levels in all the variables, you see, including the classification rate. And in addition, we found that they have higher risk scores, less protective factors for recidivists, and more recidivist real person. So we prevent the juvenile court about these results, because they have to be aware of these cultural differences, subtle, especially this classification error, and you have to respect the principle of equality in front of the law, because they all already suffer discrimination every day, and then if we already there is a double victimization here in the juvenile justice, it's not fair. Oh, something happened. Yeah, okay. So now let's go for the conclusions. We can say no. Not there. Well, I can. Okay. Well, I yeah, okay, so our conclusions were, and we are not done yet with the juvenile court, and I would like to express my gratitude to them, because we found them everything, all this work couldn't have been possible, and they are still there for us and for improvement. But I think the risk, if we focus on the risk principle, the inventory works pretty well in the Spanish context, on the full version, for the short version, for ethnic minorities. So I think it's a good, valuable, thank you. So, You need to say that it didn't work. So it was a good, and they are still using them, using the inventory. What else? For the needs principle, we think that there are different predominant criminogenic needs according to culture. Because, as I told you, I think education and leisure are more important in Spanish or Mediterranean or collectivistic societies than other individual features, for example, personality or antisocial attitudes. And also what we found, not only in criminogenic needs, but in protective factors, was that substance abuse was a protective factor for Arabs and Roma. So they didn't adopt our costumes in this way. For example, this is supported by previous studies with Japanese population, with Japanese youth offenders. Well, the media in substance abuse is near zero. So I think there are subtle cultural differences in the specific. It's you have to be aware of this cultural. And finally, the professional overrides. What is this? This is a fourth principle of the model. When and it's useful for any professional using this tool, that when you don't see anything, nothing represented in the tool, or that it's overrepresented, it's not there, or it's too much there, or too present there. So you can always adjust the ultimate risk assignment manually. I mean, you can modify the level of risk. And for example, this is useful for ethnic minorities, for the Roma group. If you find that it's over level, you can do a downward override to adjust. Of course, you will think, well, this maybe decrease the accuracy of the inventory, but yeah, it has been so that only in severe crimes or in very violent cases. So we can make use of it. That's it. Thank you very much for your
Thank you very much, Professor Villanueva, for those valuable insights into how to support youths in the justice system. And with that, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to both speakers for sharing with us their expertise and their knowledge. Please join me in a final round of applause so we can proceed to the next session. Thank you. Now, I would like to ask if any of you has questions to the speakers. I'm sure you do. Yes?
Thank you. Manuel, I really enjoyed the presentation. In my heart, I might be a Freudian. I have a question, because you talked about the directionality being about how violent ideation or predicted later violence, for example, or other outcomes. Would it be possible with some sort of a model to see whether the expression of violence, committing violence, reduced later violent fantasies? So in actually doing it, do we let off steam? Do we find it's horrible, and therefore we have less violent fantasies because we've experienced hitting someone and that's actually really not very nice?
I thought when you put up your hands, you were going to ask difficult questions, and so you did. We started analyzing this, and our findings are more pointing in the other direction, in that engaging in violent behavior makes you more likely to then kind of like fantasize about the violent behavior. So it's not a cut. Even there, we don't find evidence for a catharsis model that if you let steam off and you engage in lots of violent behavior, that's going to make you think less about it. No.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hello, thank you for being here today. I would like to ask, like maybe both of you, it's not really personal. So violence, from what I've seen and from what I've studied, we can say that it's kind of related to an impulsive behavior, right? That's why in youth population, you can see that they are more aggressive, or 17-year-olds are compared to older people, they're more aggressive. So my question would be, in terms of solutions, like what can we do to prevent people from being violent later? I would think that social inequality, for example, people that live in ghettos or poor areas, like if you guys think that interventions to help these people to get more opportunities to study, to have access to healthcare, etc., if you think that that would actually work, and if maybe even in the future, obviously this would be an investment for the future, if we could actually prevent lots of things like racism from happening, because we would give access from these people, they would be able to just prosper, and who knows? It's just, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question, because I think everyone here by now has agreed that, for example, the presentation of Professor Manuel and me, that if you have a model, or you have a previous experience of victimization, or you have a modeling behavior, you can copy all the violence that you see in your household, in the mass media, and so on. So social learning theory and modeling and everything is completely on the scope there. But also, I think that we have to I'm sorry, because we are psychologists, most of us, but we usually work at the individual level, and the risk factors that you are talking about needs a more wider approach, so a macro system approach, because we are controlling poverty, socioeconomic status in all our analysis, and that's the real problem at the end, I think. So if you are talking, there's more probability of having violence if you don't have anything to eat, or you have a very bad conditions, living conditions, and so on. So sometimes we are a bit blind to this macro system levels, like maybe poverty or law reforms or whatever. So sometimes we cannot do as much as we would like, but we have to take in mind, to keep in mind all these macro level variables, I think.
I want to take the opportunity of your question to make kind of like almost a methodological comment here. I think when we think about this link between macro and micro, at least for me, the starting point must be the event, the micro level, where the violence happens. And that's for the understanding of what is happening, first of all, also kind of like developmental, whether you have a developmental model, whether you have a kind of wider society model, first of all, you need to understand the dynamics of the event that leads to violence. And that doesn't mean that you should ignore the wider social context, but it then is about constructing the causal chain that leads the macro level context to the event, to what is happening. So the offender that shows up in the youth justice court, what is happening in their personal life and with their personality, and then kind of like trying to link this back to, and this link is often less obvious than one would like to think. So I think saying that social inequality is a background, high-level, upstream factor that contributes to violence is one thing, and there may be some truth to it. But then demonstrating how exactly the link functions is much more difficult, and it's important to understand that link, because when you want to do intervention, you need to understand exactly what the intervention should be. And just increasing progressive taxes, for instance, there is good evidence suggesting that is not effective. You know, you really need to think through what is it about inequality that is linked, and there's so many possibilities. It could be linked to inequalities in access to health system. It could be linked to inequalities in access to the education system. It could be kind of like direct poverty effects. It could be linked to gangs being more likely in disadvantaged neighborhoods. I could go on and give a long talk about a dozen of possibilities how inequality and violence are linked. And advancing the understanding of these causal mechanisms is important to make progress with prevention science.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you. And any more questions? Any final questions? Yes? Oh, at least two.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, first of all, for being here today. I really enjoyed your presentations. And I have two questions, one for each of you. So for Professor EISNER, when you look into your data, have you found any differences in different types of violence ideations and how they might or might not actually end up being expressed as actual violence? I'm thinking about, for example, targeted violence, like actually thinking about being violent towards someone else and fantasizing about playing violent sports, physical violence in sports, wrestling your friends, things like this. And for Professor Villanueva, I'm thinking about, I know that the override, I don't know the term exactly. I know that it's important for ethnic minorities, but how do we account for the fact that sometimes professionals might actually give privilege to their own clinical observations instead of the actual score from the instrument itself? And how do we know that sometimes we might not actually be getting some bias in these kind of assessments? Yeah. So.
Just very quickly, so I would love to understand. I've become quite fascinated by this topic, and there is just a few limitations here that I want to point out on, and a few strengths. First of all, the various items tap on different motivations, for instance, of violence. Some of them don't even have a motivation. You just ask them, well, would you like to kick? Are you thinking about just doing massive physical harm to somebody without specifying anything about what the motivation is? Then we have questions about revenge as a motivation. We have items that tap on power as a motivation. And I expected at the beginning that they would kind of like show up at different subdimensions in a factor analysis, but they don't. They just load neatly into one factor with just an amazingly high Cronbach's alpha of about 0.90. So what the evidence suggests for these items is that they are all interrelated. What I would like to do in the future, and that we haven't done this, is to also include a scale of victimization fantasies. So thinking about the threat of being a victim, and because that's something different and that's not measured here. And so I could imagine that they are both interrelated, but they are partly something different. And so that would then link to the question, well, how are cognitions about victimization linked to cognitions about perpetrating violence?
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, the overrides, the professional overrides are explained in the manual of the inventory, so you can apply them to any case that, for example, challenges the risk principles, such as the unaccompanied foreign minors. Or in this case, we talked to the Juvenile Court, and they say that they could use it because they were not using them at all. But it's true that you don't have the security that it's working well. We haven't done any study about this, the possible decrease in accuracy in this case. So I think it's a good thing to do. But yeah, they are using it, but because the Juvenile Court asked about other possibilities, for example, including other items that were, well, it's like we call culturally amend tools. So can we include, for example, incarcerated household member? Because Roma youth also have some incarcerated members in some custody centers. Or can we include experiences of racism, as you said before? So, but with this inclusion of items, we really decrease accuracy. And what about other minorities? If we amend this tool for Roma, it's not valid for Arab or Romanian or whatever other ethnic minorities. So it's a big deal there. So at least it's working pretty well, but we don't have the answer yet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. We don't have time to ask more questions now, but you are welcome to catch the speakers in the coffee break and ask a few more things if you wish. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
But sorry. Yeah, exactly.